Yo, it's your boy TTK, and today we're going to be ranking every single 35 Pokes metagame or 2024. The year's almost over. We probably got, like, to be fair, I'm recording this on 29th, so we literally have 2 days left of the year. So yeah, might as well get this video out of the way because, you know, I started playing 35 Pokes in 2024 and I was like, cool, we've had 12 months of every single metagame, so I might as well just rank them all because I've had varying degrees of fun depending on the metagame that I've been playing throughout the year. But yeah, if you guys do enjoy this video, leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel. Join the kingdom. We're on our way to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the of next year, 2025. You guys have been subscribing pretty fast thanks to the fake mons video. I much appreciated. Part 2 will be coming, guys, don't worry about it. I want to discuss more of these Pokemon for sure, especially seeing how the reception has been. But either way, let's get into ranking every single metagame of 35 Pokes, shall we? So obviously we have 12 metas to rank because there's, you know, 12 months in a year, but I'm gonna separate January, February and March together, like, from my actual rankings, because to be honest, I did not get sufficient enough games in any of these metas for me to actually rank them you know, like, properly. So in terms of January, February, March, we're gonna base it on vibes, just ranking those three together. I'm gonna put March at the bottom just because I don't know, it doesn't really seem that, like, crazy to me. Like, there's some interesting ones, but overall, like, some of these monsters just look bad in general. Like, fair enough, like, Flygon is in here in March, which obviously Flygon's my favorite Pokemon, if it wasn't obvious enough. But yeah, it just doesn't really seem like March is too crazy. From what I've heard, things like Pidgeot and Seaking were actually good in this meta, which is insane to me, seeing how these are some of the worst fully evolved Pokemon of all time. But, you know, like, 35 Pokes does end up making certain ones work depending on, like, you know, the overall metagame at large. But yeah, so March will be 3rd place. I'll give January 2nd place as well. There is also another Seaking meta, but yeah, a bit more interesting mons, slightly higher power level for sure. You have Rhyperior, you have Snorlax, you have Tangrowth, you have Lucario, like, just a lot more mons that are, like, higher power level wise, so it would probably end up being a more fun meta. And then we have February, because I've actually played February quite a bit and this tier is actually quite fun. Also have some of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Superior is my favorite grass type, Zebstrika is my favorite electric type. Also has, like, and Sork is my favorite fighting type. Like, if this is a meta game that I would play, like, there's a lot of Pokemon I like in this meta game. So, you know, definitely putting this above January and March for sure. But either way, let's get into the actual meta games I actually did end up playing quite a bit. So, you know, we're actually going to get into the proper ranking. Alright, coming in at number 9 here, I'm gonna have to put April's metagame here just because of the fact that realistically I only joined in the end part of April, so I'm just like, well, again, it's not like I didn't play any single games like for January and March. It was a thing where, like, I had like 5 days to play this meta and I didn't really cook enough in this meta game for me to put it any higher. Not to say it's a bad meta game, like, it seems to be a decent one. Like, I know Stool was quite good with Alola Mola, Slowking, Palosan. Like, there's a lot of defensive, you know, options here, which I do like because it means that hyper offense isn't overrunning the entire tier. But it's just a thing where I just did not have enough time to cook in this metagame realistically. And a lot of people look back at April with, like, mixed reviews to a certain extent because, you know, if you're a Pokemon player competitively, when do you ever like playing Balancy to, like, Stool like metagames realistically? Now, no one really enjoys playing those sort of meta games, so I'll give that to April. But I feel like if I started playing April from the beginning, I feel like I could have actually mastered this tier quite well, to be honest. But yeah, it's definitely gonna have to be at the bottom for me just because of the fact that I don't have sufficient time compared to other meta games. But at the same time, I did play and it was just all right to me, you know, so what else can I really say? Number 8, yeah, number 8. Well, I'm gonna give it to July. Just like, July is not a bad meta game per se. Like, again, I didn't really have too much fun playing it, but there was a lot of options. Like, diversity wise, there's a lot of team styles that could have worked. I feel like when July first came out, I was just like, cool. So you have like 2 chlorophyll mons, you have a solar power Pokemon, and I'm just like, well, you know, Sun could have been good. You also have Lilligant chlorophyll as well. So I was just like, well, Sun has quite a few options. You also have, like, webs. Like, it was somewhat a diverse meta game, you know, but there was just a lot of sweepers, to be fair. Like, you had Shell Smash, Cloyster, Quiverduns, Lilligant. You had, you know, Shell Smash, Blastoise, which obviously could be checked by Gujo quite effectively. But at the same time, like, July had its own offense, and then obviously you have these 12 extra mons as well because it was an anniversary for 35 pokes, so they just added 12 of last year's, you know, highest used Pokemon depending on the month. Yanmega, you know, Chestnut from December, Zebstrika from February, all of that stuff. And overall, I feel like July loses its, like, you know, ranking a bit just because you had 12 extra Pokemon, so it ended up not being 35 mons but 47, which, you know, 47 is one of my favorite numbers, so I can't really complain. But at the same time, for balancing's sake, it's just kind of hard to have like these extra Pokemon that, to be fair, they didn't really add much. Like, fair enough, like you had something like Dondozo, which could handle every single physical threat in the tier, but again, these 12 mons didn't really add much to the metagame. But at the same time, just having those extra mons, plus, you know, the already like issue that I was having in terms of trying to handle every single setup mon in the tier, it was just kind of hard to build consistent teams for July, I feel. So yeah, overall, won't be any higher just because of those issues, obviously. Alright, coming out at number 7, we do have November's metagame here. And to be fair, the rest of the metagames are going to be pretty hard to rank because I genuinely had fun playing the remaining metagames. But, you know, like, I'm going to have to give it to November here just because, like, it was good. Obviously, like, in terms of this tier, we started off with Overquill, Oricorio, and Frostmoth, and that was the first voting slate of the month. So we banned Overquill and Oricorio Fire form, and we kept Frostmoth. And overall, like, November, actually, you could actually build some solid teams for this, and I don't think it's a bad metagame, realistically. Like, I actually had fun playing November. It's just like I enjoy the other metagames remaining a lot more. And in terms of why I don't really like November too much is because of the fact that, you know, Frostmoth was still a controversial Pokemon, and the remaining, like, there's at least like 2 or 3 more metagames after this where controversial Pokemon is in the tier which doesn't end up getting banned. So you're just kind of stuck in a tier where you have this annoying ass Pokemon which is affecting you in terms of team building. And like I've stated in many 35 Pokes videos, team building is probably the most important aspect of this format because, again, you have 35 options, which isn't a lot of options to choose from. So it's a thing where if building is annoying, it's kind of hard to get a good consistent team for me in order for me to, you know, get wins in this format. And Frostmoth was kind of annoying. I feel like as time went on it was easier to handle, but overall you look at Frostmoth and you're just like, well, what actually checks this thing realistically on the special side? Like, you have Ice Beam, which, you know, Ice into this metagame was pretty strong, not gonna lie. And you'll probably think, oh, Araquanid could kind of check Frostmoth in a certain way, but then you have to worry about Hurricane or worry about Air Slash Flinch. And yeah, it was just kind of annoying to prep for. Turtonator was a pretty good mon. A lot of people were sleeping on it, but you know, it was almost as good as good as a win con as Frostmoth was, just because, you know, you'll Shell Smash or Turtonator in the late game. It actually has good bulk, and then you'd end up just Oko and everything at +2. So it's just a thing where you have there's another meta game with more setup sweepers, and like I just feel like November lacked the defensive options to, you know, balance out the offensive options that we had, like the Shell Smashers or the Quiver Dancers or the Sticky Web mons. Like Galvantula being, you know, like, throughout Galvantula's history, the mon's not being higher than like RU or even UU at this point. And I'm just like, the fact that that mon was even hard to wall was just kind of annoying because it was so good, because it'll just set out sticky webs. But yeah, overall, I wouldn't mind playing November again. It's definitely not as bad as November 2023 metagame, but at the same time, if you're to decide any metagame to come back to in 2024, November is definitely not high, in my opinion. At number 6, we have September's metagame. And to be fair, September's metagame, I remember I was actually having fun with it, to be honest. I felt like there was good enough defensive options. Like, the offensive threats were quite underrated. Like, you had a lot of Pokemon that I hadn't had the opportunity to use in quite a while, like Excelgor, Basculin, Simisage. Like, a lot of my lower tier mons that I had fun using back in Gen 7 PU, this tier was, you know, full of some of these Pokemon like Manectric and Mudsdale. Like, it was like playing SMPU again, which, you know, was a tier that kind of made me want to, you know, make this channel in the first place. So, you know, it gives me nostalgic, you know, memories. But at the same time, this is also another format with another controversial one I feel like should have been dealt with by the community, but you know, it didn't happen, and that is Crocodile. Now, Crocodile's impact on September basically made me stop playing it, you know, halfway through the metagame, which is a shame, to be honest, because the fact that, like, I'll tell you this now, guys. The fact that I had to use Komala Trick Room as my most common team style in this month just goes to show how inconsistent I felt teams were when Crocodile was present in the metagame. Because there's a thing where Crocodile is a Pokemon, it's still a pretty strong Pokemon to this day. Is it in Gen 9? I'm pretty sure it's in Gen 9. And it should be around the UU or RU level. So this is still a good Pokemon throughout the ages. Has a high attack stat, decent speed, pretty strong stab options and coverage options as well. And I just felt like in 35 pokes, especially in this metagame, I felt like Crocodile was a bit too much. Now, do you know why I felt like it was a bit too much? Because you had Moxie, so Choice Scarf sets could always just snowball out of control. You also had Bulk Up sets, which, you know, could also just 1v1 its checks as well. It gets higher physical defense, so it's harder to revenge kill. And it was just a thing where the Crocodile checks that everyone was saying were good were not actually that good. You had Mudsdale on one with no recovery, I didn't appreciate losing his leftovers on, you know, subsequent switching. So, like, it would be a thing, you get out Rocks or you get out Spikes, because something like Clodsire had Spikes, for example. So it's a thing where your knock off Mudsdale's leftovers is getting 3-hit killed. Even though Mudsdale's quite a bulky Pokemon, it's still getting 3-hit killed by Crocodile's knockoff, especially if it was Life Orb. It'll be a thing where most of his checks lose leftovers. Or is a thing where, you know, it gets a snowballing boost, and obviously he's going to be able to 2-hit KO most of the tier with, you know, a Choice Band boost basically at +1 thanks to its ability Moxie. So it's a thing where I just felt like Crocodile was a bit too much for the tier, and like I felt like if I wanted to build any sort of team in September, it was like going to be a hyper offense team, because there's no point of trying to check Crook consistently because there were no good checks or any consistent checks. I'm not going to say they weren't good checks. Like Mudsdale was a decent check, but again, this is a mon that lost its leftovers, had no reliable recovery, and that's it basically. Like no other mons were really switching into Crook stabs that well, so that's why I felt like it was an annoying Pokemon to have in the builder. Obviously, compared to some of the other meta games that we had with some of their banned Pokemon, is a thing where like Crook doesn't seem that bad in comparison, but at the same time, for the metagame that it was in, I felt like Crook was a bit too annoying on the builder, and I think it should have been banned at some point. I felt like I would have enjoyed September a lot more if we didn't have Crocodile in it, and that's why it comes in at number 6. Alright guys, we've reached the top 5, and to be fair, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like my top 2 are actually locked in, but everything else is pretty much fair game to rank at this point, and it's going to be a bit of a hard one. But I'm definitely going to put August at number 5, and to be fair, I'm a fan of August. The current trios tournament that's happening does include August 2024, and to be honest, I think August is a good meta. I genuinely enjoyed playing August. Don't really have much issues with August per se. At the time, I just felt like, I don't even know, like genuinely I don't think there's any problems with August overall in terms of the Pokemon. Like you have Charizard, you have Mandibuzz, there was a lot of no, actually Braviary Hisui was slightly annoying, just slightly annoying. I don't think it's broken, because at the end of the day this mon doesn't really have a speed tier, prone to priority, weak to dark, you know, there are ways of beating it basically, and obviously it was a thing where I felt Braviary Hisui could have like its checks as well. Like Blissey, if it's not running Side Shock, Blissey will just wall it. Bolton was good, Rotom Heat was good, Heracross also outsped it, so it was a very easy mon to revenge kill in a sense. But in terms of defensive play to Braviary Hisui, if it was Tinted Lens, it had no good checks, I'll be honest. You see Lantern, and Lantern is a somewhat bulky Pokemon, high HP, decent special defense, but at this point the only good Braviary Hisui check was like Alolan Muck. Everything else just kind of got folded. Like if you saw Braviary Hisui come in and you wanted to try and find a switch into it, Muck was your only good switching. But regardless, it was a good meta game where there was a lot of diversity in terms of the picks. Like you're probably thinking Mandibuzz, you have Heracross, Quagsire, like some of these mons are probably going to be on most teams, but there are some underrated Pokemon like as well, like Vanillux. I don't think too many people used Vanillux at the time, but Choice Specs Vanillux actually got the jump on quite a few Pokemon in the metagame, despite the fact that his speed tier was in such an awkward position, because you are a Pokemon that You know, you couldn't end up beating Rotom H because your stabs are walled. Mamoswine also resisted your stabs. Also outsped you by 1 point, which wasn't fun. Charizard was a common Pokemon, and Heracross also outsped you. So it was a thing where Vanilluxe didn't have too much of a decent time, but at least it was an underrated breaker where if you got in on some of its like defensive answers that could check it, like Lantern, Quagsire, like Freeze Dry was pretty free most of the time, to be honest. So there was just a lot of underrated picks that you could use in August, which is why I actually kind of rate it somewhat highly as a metagame, and definitely in this trios tour I'll definitely try and build more teams for this. Well, yeah, overall August comes at number 5. It can't really be any higher just because the remaining metagames I've had a lot more fun playing, essentially. At number 4, we do have June 2024 metas game, and overall, like, looking back at June, at the time, I would say I found it somewhat annoying to play, but at the same time, I genuinely did have a lot of fun playing this metagame. I felt like there was a lot of good stuff, a lot of underrated Pokemon as well, but the thing that makes June annoying for me was the fact that Cyclizar had Shed Tail, and I felt like Shed Tail was kind of annoying overall. Some people said Shed Tail wasn't an issue. I don't agree. I think Shed Tail is not a move that should be allowed in most competitive formats. I just feel like it enables offense too much, especially in a metagame like June, where I feel like defensive play had a lot of options. You know, you had a lot of bulky Pokemon like Galarian Slowbro, Registeel, you had Rotom Wash, Bellibolt. Like, there's good defensive utility in this format, but I just felt like offense was the way to go because you had the Cyclizar Shed Tail into a Pokemon like Mimikyu that obviously can take a free hit. Like, you get 2 free hits on Mimikyu if you lay it in on a Shed Tail, and I'm just like, well, that's not too fun, is it? Like, realistically, and not to say Mimikyu didn't have its answers. I don't think Mimikyu was broken. You know, there was ways of playing around it for sure. You know, Talonflame could burn it, obviously. Surprisingly, does not even Ocarina Rugas from full health at +2 just because Shadow Claw is like the weakest move of all time. You know, Registeel could tank +2 Drain Punch quite comfortably, and overall, like, it wasn't hard to check Mimikyu. There's a thing where, like, a lot of the offensive play was just enabled too much by Shed Tail, I think, which was kind of annoying. But it's not like offense was running the thing, because at the same time, I'm not going to say this meta was HO incarnate. Like, it really wasn't. Because, like, as long as you have mons like Registeel, Galarian Slowbro, Talonflame, Rotom Wash, like, you're going to get a bulky offense / balancy metagame. But, like, obviously it was a bulky offense where, you know, depending on the matchup, it was just kind of annoying in that sense, because if you didn't really get the matchup and you're facing like a Cyclizar team and it Shed Tails into a mon that does well versus your team, they pretty much just have the advantage all the time. So it's just that was somewhat annoying to deal with. But overall, a lot of fun Pokemon that you could have used in June, like Surfetch'd, Runerigus, Heliolisk. And the thing is, I remember at the time people were just like, why are you using the Heliolisk over Electric Terrain Raichu? And I'm just like, well, Pincurchin is a mon, and I don't necessarily want to use that mon. And Heliolisk had a lot of interesting options like normal typing, so it's not weak to Ghost. It's immune to Ghost, so you'd always end up beating Mimikyu, which is why I preferred Heliolisk over Raichu, especially because, like, you are obviously outspeed Mimikyu, its priority option can't beat you. You'd Volt Switch, maybe sack something, and then just come in and kill, you know, the Mimikyu with your Heliolisk, and that's why, you know, I liked using it over Alolan Raichu. But overall, I like June. I think June was a good meta, and we're going to be getting into the top 3 now, which is, these are the peak meta games. These are the meta games I enjoy with a passion, for sure. Alright, so we're in with the number 3 pick, and I have to give it to October, to be fair. October marked a milestone for 35 pokes, which this was the first metagame that had the ladder on Pokemon Showdown. This is the first one that had a suspect test that you were allowed to ladder for, and yeah, it was just generally a very good time in October to have this metagame, because overall, this is, like, if I was to calculate the base stat total average of every single metagame that we've had in the past 12 months, October is definitely at its highest. You have some heavy base stat total monsters like Guzzlord, Emboar, Gengar, Snorlax, Honchkrow. Like, there was just generally a lot of power in this metagame. And, you know, it goes to show, because you had them all like Bishop, Shell Smash, Blastoise, Zoroark, Hisui, Monkey Dory, Gengar, like I mentioned, Porygon Z, and, like, you know, it was just fun. Like, it was just a very fun meta to play. A lot of the common things I would like to use in this meta game was Cypher and Rhydon, and a lot of people would probably try and discount these NFEs just because, you know, they're NFEs, so they're not like fully evolved Pokemon. But Cypher was genuinely a solid threat in this meta game because it had the speed tier, dual wing beat at the power of Brave Bird level power with literally no recoil attached, SD, Trailblaze, and close combat as well. Cypher was honestly one of the best picks, and I was happy that, you know, a mon like Cypher, which is definitely one of my favorite bug type Pokemon of all time, got a time to shine. Porygon Z, also a very strong breaker, not a mon I use consistently, but was a mon that you had to respect because adaptability or download would just make this one incredibly difficult to switch into. Emboar, it gets a lot of hate obviously as an overall Pokemon, but in this metagame, Emboar was probably one of the best stops to Bishop on the offensive and the defensive side of things, and yeah, it was a very solid Pokemon to have. There was no issue with Octo, like the rest of the metagames I'm going to talk about, there was practically no issues with them. It's just a thing of which metagame I enjoyed more than the other at this point, because I genuinely had a fun with the rest of the metagames that I have to mention. Only thing is, would it be nice to see Bishop gone from October? But I feel like at some point everyone just started to adapt to Bishop in general, just because like the tier naturally had answers for Bishop. It's not like we weren't lacking in Bishop checks. You had Emboar that resisted dual stab, defensive Blastoise with body press with Oko it. Even something as niche as Guzzlord in this tier was able to actually handle Bishop to a certain extent. Sandaconda was on a lot of teams and had enough bulk to handle Bishop. It wouldn't obviously like taking a +2 knockoff, but Eviolite Bishop would survive, you know, Earthquake from Sandaconda. You also had the Alolan Dugtrio, which had to be careful of Sucker Punch, of course, but obviously had enough power to Oko Bishop, Magmortar, Zora Kasui, if you obviously disguise it as a Pokemon that resists Dark, for example. But yeah, overall, Bishop had the counterplay. Even Rhydon was able to live a +2, you know, Iron Head and just use counter back to Oko the Bishop. But yeah, I feel like everyone got used to Bishop, and even if we had a second suspect test, I'd still vote ban on it, just because I felt like it was still a Pokemon that was quite over centralizing at a point. But you know, I don't mind that Bishop stayed. You know, like you could still get quite a good number of teams from this metagame with Bishop included. But yeah, October was definitely a fun time, one of my favorite metagames this year, and you know, if we get another retro tour happening for 35 pokes, I would like to see October get brought back, you know. At number 2, I wasn't actually expecting to see December. December's not over yet, but at the same time, I wasn't expecting it to see at the number 2 slot. But I genuinely believe that December is the second best meta of the year, despite all of the tiering issues we've had, because we've had to ban 3 Pokemon from this tier, and the tier has like, it never really stabilized until like at least a week or a week and a half ago. But it's a thing where like December is pretty good. Like a lot of people want to like say December isn't really that good, and I just have to disagree with them, because there's a lot of solid viable Pokemon in this metagame. I even calculated it when I was discussing with someone why I believe December is actually a decent metagame, and it's a thing where I counted like 22 out of 35 Pokemon in the metagame are actually worth using. Now, I haven't done that for the I haven't really done that sort of calculation for the rest of the metagames of the year. But it's a thing where if you're getting like roughly 62% of the metagame being viable, I think you have a pretty good tier on your hands. And obviously, this tier went through a lot of changes. We had Jolteon, we had Lokix, we had Okidogi in the metagame, and we also just got Okidogi 2.0 in Toxicroak. But at least Toxicroak is balanced because it doesn't really have much bulk compared to Okidogi, and it doesn't hit nearly as hard, so it's a lot more manageable in that sense. But yeah, I do think December is in a pretty good spot. Sun is viable, even though a lot of people want to try and sleep on Sun. Don't get it twisted. Scovillain plus Jumpluff combination is quite strong. Caracosta, one of my favorite fossils of all time, is in this metagame and is actually quite a solid threat. Morpeko is finally good. Guzzlord is finally good. Like, there's a lot of W's in December, and I have to, you know, respect it, because there's a lot of Pokemon that have appeared in previous 35 Pokes metagames like Guzzlord and Morpeko, and even Alolan Golem, and these guys haven't really been that good. but December finally gives them a chance to shine, which I'm happy about. Guzzlord took 3 meta games to be good, guys. You know, never give up on life, achieve your dreams, all of that shit, innit? But yeah, December's at number 2, and everyone probably saw what number 1 was coming if you know me from the 35 Pokes community, but I definitely have to give this meta game the number 1 spot. At number 1, the best meta game that I played of 35 Pokes this year has to go to May. May, obviously, I might be a bit biased because this was the first 35 Pokes meta game that I actually played and I had a lot of fun with, but I do feel like May holds up quite well and there isn't really much problems with it. It's quite a balanced meta game and there's a lot of fun options to use. Now, when May came out, we had Hawlucha over Cherrim, and Hawlucha was insane. Hawlucha was broken. there's no doubt about that. The Sableye was legitimately the only good check to Hawlucha. It would set up a +2, activate Unburden somehow, outspeed the entire tier, and just OHKO everything with acrobatics or close combat. But yeah, we got rid of Hawlucha, you know, post haste. And the fact that we had a suspect test and some people were voting don't ban Hawlucha, I was just like, are you silly? Like, I straight up just thought in my head, are you actually silly? Because why would you keep Hawlucha into the tier with one solid defensive answer? Like, do I want to spam Sableye on every team? No, I don't. So Hawlucha had to go, and I'm happy that everyone else realized that voted ban that Hawlucha had to go. But yeah, regardless, after that, the metagame became quite balanced. You had quite a lot of good Pokemon like Alolan Raichu, which also had a suspect test. Because as you can see, there's no ground types in this metagame. So obviously you're probably thinking, well, Alolan Raichu is quite a menace to society because it can just volt switch around. But it ended up not being too bad. Obviously I wanted it banned because I just kind of felt like the lack of ground immunities kind of was annoying. And it could always keep up momentum versus its checks. But at the same time, it was quite like, we kind of got to a point where we were able to check it quite well. Things like Shiinotic were rising in usage. Carbink was also a really good check. It did have electric terrain, obviously, so you could actually outspeed it with Choice Scarfers, or even something like Sucker Punch Zoroark or Shadow Sneak Dusknoir as you know, priority options to revenge kill it. But yeah, overall, May, Mambo TND, shout out my bro, Mambo TND, he knows about May, he won the tournament for May. This is the best meta we had this year, and I'm not going to hear any different from anyone else. But yeah, thanks for watching this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know down below if you play 35 Pokes at all this year and which meta is your favorite out of all of these. I'm hoping to see some, you know, good responses. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.